American Unity Show. I'm your host, Greg Fanning. Today we're going to talk about the growing national debt and the history of the national debt. The national debt has fluctuated over time. Upon the election of George Bush in 2000, the national debt was roughly around $5 trillion. And by the time Obama left office in 2017, the debt was around $20 trillion. This shows no one party is responsible for this, and it's a group effort and a bipartisan problem. There are lots of Republicans who are big spenders, and there are lots of Democrats who are big spenders. With recent stimulus bills passing the House with bipartisan support, increasing the national debt to almost $30 trillion. The liberals who say it's Trump's fault and the conservatives who say it's Obama's fault, it's both parties' faults. We have to remember that as long as we are in debt, another thing we have to remember is as long as we are in debt to China, they have a significant leash on us and they can control what we can do and what we cannot do. One of our guests will expand on that. What we have to do is work to fight the debt, obviously. We have to have good currency, low taxes, low regulation, and free and fair trade. And we have to have general accounting in the federal government. Any business that would run like the federal government would not be able to survive. First, in my opinion, the president must tell the inspector generals of each department or the Office of Management and Budget to provide a list of departments within each agency and what they do. Once this is done, the president and the White House senior staff will go through and determine which agencies will be eliminated and what we will do with the federal employees losing their jobs. The federal government must partner with corporations and small businesses to help the eliminated employees find new jobs in the private sector. We will have buyouts for certain employees close to retirement, spending into debt essentially. Once this is done, we can reduce the federal, we can propose a federal budget and reduce the national deficit. We also have to add amendments like the balanced budget amendment, which will help prevent future Congresses and administrations from. We also have to be financially responsible government, by the people, for the people, and of the people. Eliminating certain federal agencies that are unnecessary and hurt the country. We also have to add amendments to the Constitution, such as a balanced budget amendment, which will prevent future Congresses and administrations from going into debt. We have to be a financially responsible government of, by, and for the people. That is the priority. Eliminating certain federal agencies that are necessary and hurt the country, such as the Department of Education, which is one of the reasons college tuition rates are so high, and give educational powers back to the states where they belong, which are talked about in principles of federalism. We also need to issue recommendations from the federal government to the states, talking about what works based upon professional opinions. Okay. We need to suspend most foreign spending to other countries and use it to benefit our country, specifically relieving the debt. And now we will have State Senator Bob Peterson, who represents Ohio's 17th State Senate District. He is the former President Pro Tem of the Ohio State Senate and a former Ohio State Representative and a farmer. He most recently ran for Congress in a special election in Ohio's 15th Congressional District in 2021.
Well, thank you for coming on. I really appreciate you coming on here. So I guess my first question is, tell us a little bit about your background and, just your background.
Yeah, so I farm, have my whole life, grew up on the family farm. Now I farm with my brother and have a son joining the operation. We're 3,000 acres corn and soybeans, southwest Ohio, Fayette County, Wishing Courthouse area. And I had the pleasure of, serving as a county commissioner and then state rep and now state senator. And I got involved in, and we can go into that later if you want, but I got involved in advocating for agriculture, when I saw, regulations that, dramatically impacted my ability to farm. And ultimately became part of Ohio Farm Bureau, recognizing that one person has a voice, but sometimes it's more effective to have groups. I served on the got active in the Ohio Farm Bureau and ultimately served as president of the Ohio Farm Bureau before moving in legislature. So, my wife and I have 3 kids and 1 granddaughter.
Awesome. Well, congratulations. That's great to hear. I think an impressive background, and you sound very well qualified. So, second question here is, tell us a little bit about the debt. Maybe you can talk about regarding Ohio, or just the national debt, or just the experience of debt, and how do you think we got here to this point in our country?
Well, I'm 59 years old, and there have been times in my life, I think 2 or 3 times, where we didn't have a national debt, and that was because we focused on the economy that grew, and we managed our spending. I mean, it's what we do as a country should be the same as we do on my farm or any business or any household. I mean, certainly there are times in a business where you need to borrow money as you get started, and there's times when a debt probably is okay during a war, certainly, and some very specific circumstances where that may make sense. But in general, and especially the astronomical debt that we have, that is burdening. I didn't look up that figure today, but every man, woman, and child, and my granddaughter, baby Maria, we owe $70,000-$80,000. That's our share of the national debt.
Wow.
And it doesn't make sense to me, especially in when times are good. And certainly we're dealing with the COVID pandemic, which is not good. But in general, the economy is doing very, very well. You can look at the stock markets. You can look at wages. We're desperate for people to work. That's why, McDonald's, $14.99 for people to work. Just drove by that sign a few minutes ago.
Wow.
And so this is a good time for our economy. May not be forever, because we are doing things that are making it very difficult for this economy to continue to grow. And part of it is the federal government is spending money that we don't have, and they're spending money foolishly. Certainly, infrastructure is probably a good thing, but depending on the infrastructure bill that they're talking about, it's just blatant spending. It's not an infrastructure bill. Very little of it would be traditional infrastructure.
Yeah, it's so true. Then we've seen this again. We saw the stimulus packages too, with the COVID relief bills. $1.2 trillion, I think one of them was, and I think there's like multiple of them that are trillions and trillions of dollars, and it's not sustainable, like you just said. So my next question is, how do you think we get out of this? What's the solution to either relieving the national debt or significantly reducing it?
So 2 things. One, quit spending money foolishly. And secondly, the times in my life when we haven't had a debt and when we've worked the debt down, it's because we've focused on growth. I mean, those are the things that grow our economy. And when you talk about trillions and trillions of dollars of debt, it'll take quite a while. Potentially the rest of my lifetime, if we start making good decisions right now. And certainly there's no indication coming out of Washington, D.C. that they continue to spend money. But it's focusing on growth, and those things are lowering taxes, reducing regulations, freeing up the entrepreneurial spirit, encouraging people to work, encouraging people to take risk, because that's what grows our economy. People taking risks, starting businesses, and growing businesses.
Yeah, absolutely. That's exactly what you're saying. Next question is, how do you think the administrative state, unelected bureaucrats, have a role in our national debt? Do you think they do have a role, or they do not? And if so, what
I'm sorry,
role do they have?
I missed some of that question. What role does who is it?
I was just saying, what role does the administrative state have in the national debt? And if any, what is it?
I'm sorry, the state of Ohio or the
No, like
federal
in the
government?
administrative state, like unelected bureaucrats, like
Oh,
regulatory.
very much so.
Yeah.
I mean, part of what turned the Ohio economy around, in 2010, I ran for the Ohio legislature because I was very happy where I was as county commissioner of farming, president of Ohio Farm Bureau. I gave that up because, 8 generations of Petersons have farmed in the United States, and 6 generations have farmed in Ohio, and the state that has been good for my family for 6 generations and hopefully for generations to come was really struggling. And it was struggling because we were making bad decisions. And the decisions were we were spending money recklessly, and we were growing the state government. So I ran, and we shrunk this. We limited government. We reduced through attrition. There weren't any mass layoffs, but through attrition, we cut the workforce. I think 15-20%, and we're still doing the things that state government should do. Certainly, that's part of it in getting our spending under control. Federal government needs to reduce the people and reduce programs and do things that incentivize businesses to grow.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more. And I think, if we do that, I think we'll be a lot better off. So my last question here is, do you think a balanced budget amendment will help this problem, or is there another, like, piece of legislation or something like that, or a constitutional amendment you would like to see happen?
I think a balanced budget, that's what the state of Ohio operates under. That's what, every government entity in the state of Ohio, whether you're a township trustee, a school board, a county, everyone has to have a balanced budget. I don't know why the federal government wouldn't have to also.
Awesome. All right, well, thank you again, Senator, for coming on here. We really appreciate it. And hope to see you again soon. I live just in Cleveland, so I'm sure we'll run into each other at some point.
That'd be great. You have a good day. Thank you so much.
All right, you too. Have a good day.
Bye.
Bye.
And now we will have author Mike Ginsberg, who is a former federal government employee, will now tell us about the national debt. His new book, Debt Bomb.
Well, thanks for coming on the program. And so let's start with this. So what's your background, and what made you, mainly write your book, Debt Bomb, and what got you interested in the national debt?
Sure. Well, I am an attorney by trade, and I work in Washington. I spent several years in private practice, but I spent after a decade in private practice, I went to the General Counsel's office of the Director of National Intelligence, and spent several years there. And that was really part of what inspired me, was just seeing, up close and personal, just how enormous the federal government is. Just this one agency alone is enormous, and there's so many little offices and pockets of people doing things. It's almost like there's no one person that can tell you everything the government does. And I just kept thinking to myself, my God, we're just sort of drowning ourselves in debt with this metastatic government. And the other concern I had was, as a Republican, I am a member of the Republican Party, and I have been active for a long time. And I was really, to be honest, kind of disappointed and disturbed by the way, over the last 4 years, when Republicans were in control of Washington under the Trump administration, just didn't address the problem at all, and in fact swept it under the rug and contributed to it. So those two frustrations combined to inspire me to write the book.
Well, that's great. It seems like you have firsthand experience, so you know what you're talking about, and that's great. So how do we get to a point where we have almost $30 trillion in debt? How did we get to this point, in your opinion, or just whatever?
I think there are a number of reasons. I think part of it is, because the United States is the reserve currency of the world, unlike other countries, if you think of Greece or Italy that have these debt issues, Argentina, we can more or less print money, and, as long as our bond ratings are pretty high, which they are, people will buy our debt. So there's an enormous appetite for American debt, and particularly when the rest of the world is sort of much less has a much weaker sort of financial position, much smaller economies, people are unwilling to, when you compare them, when people are looking to buy debt, they're much more confident in American debt. We're sort of the least of a bad lot. So that's a major aspect of it. And the other aspect of it, I think, is because we are able to print so much and there is such an appetite for our debt, politicians of both sides of the aisle have become conditioned to thinking, money is free. And so they act accordingly.
Interesting. That's very interesting. So what do you think we do to, address this problem? What's our best solution?
Well, it's hard. I mean, because until people experience it, all of the threat, all the worries, all the problems associated with a debt crisis are theoretical. No, we've never experienced one. Nobody really knows what it's like, and so you can sort of be a Cassandra and sort of say, well, this is what's going to happen, but nobody, there's no tangible proof. So, I fear that there's nothing you can do, to convince people to care about the debt. That was why I was so frustrated with the Republican Party, because they were really, to me, the last thing standing between us and the fiscal cliff, the abyss. And they kind of went the same way as the Democrats.
Yeah. One thing I noticed in your book that I think a lot of people, I was kind of puzzled about it, but I see what you mean, is can you tell us a little bit about how China has a part in our debt and, how we, how they kind of have us in a kind of in a corner here. What's China's role in this? Because I know you mentioned that in your book.
Sure. Well, China, they hold probably a little more than $1 trillion of our debt. And, they could, if they wanted to, if they dumped all that debt, instantly, we would have a problem. We would have a real crisis. If the Chinese were to get other debt holders, and that was kind of how I structured it, because I don't think China alone could create a debt crisis, but if, a number of people banded together and said, we're not going to buy American debt anymore, we're not going to hold it, America would have a real problem. We really would be forced to cut back on things that we spend on, the basics, what we consider basics, Medicare, Medicaid, things like that. So China, by holding that debt, it has a weapon in its hand. Now, whether it would use it or not, obviously it's hard to say, because they would suffer economic consequences too. I mean, they don't just hold that debt out of the kindness of their heart. They use it to control their own currency's value. So they have their own self-serving reasons why they might not want to do that, but they could. And if push came to shove, if we're fighting in the South China Sea or something like that, they might be tempted.
That's a very interesting. I don't think a lot of people are aware of that. That China, I know we're kind of in a a trade war with them in some ways, and with all the tariffs, and I know there's been that going on, and I don't think a lot of people realize that China actually has a role and is a part of our debt. So I think that's very interesting. You mentioned that in your book. My final question here is, so if you could expand a little bit more on how are both parties responsible? Because I know some people associate the Republican Party with being the fiscally conservative party. I know you touched on that a little bit. And the Democrats are more bigger government, naturally creates more debt. So I wonder if you could expand on how Republicans have drifted away from their fiscal conservatism, and the Democrats, have not, how their, positions don't work for our country economically, and just how both parties have gone off the train tracks. If you could expand on that a little bit.
Sure. Well, I mean, I think, as I say, Democrats sort of view money as sort of free. They just print it, and there's this sort of magic money tree. And so, there's nothing that's my son in the background there.
Right.
But, the Democrats just sort of view this as, they can print money, and, there's just this modern monetary theory and all this stuff. I mean, at least they're honest about it. I mean, they don't care about the debt. They think they can rack it up indefinitely. They're wrong. I think they're terribly wrong, terribly misguided, but that's what they think. Republicans, the tragedy with the Republicans is that, they, at least at the policy-making level, for years have been, fiscally conservative. But you look at what happened in 2016, you have 16 people running for president that say we're going to deal with the debt. We want to deal with the debt. And there's one candidate who comes out and says, I'm not touching Social Security. I'm not touching Medicare. I'm not touching Medicaid. And that's the candidate the Republican Party nominated. So I think at the end of the day, I think the problem really is with the American people. The American people simply, both parties' bases think that this free lunch can go on forever, and there's nobody is out there saying this is not doable. Nobody wants to. It's unpopular. Even Republicans, even though they say, we really want limited government, when push comes to shove, they still, voters want to get theirs. And when everybody feels that way, there's no break on the system.
That's really something else. Well, I appreciate you coming on the show here, Mike, and I encourage everybody to buy your book, Debt Bomb. It's a great book. Really, it's a fictional novel, but it says in a clever way what will happen if this national deficit continues and we don't do something soon. So I appreciate you coming on here, Mike, and I hope to see you again soon.
Thanks again. I really appreciate the opportunity to chat with you.
All right. Have a good day, Mike. Good talking to you.
You too. Talk to you soon. Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Good. All right. While we can sit here and complain, nothing will change unless we all step up and take action. Whether that be deciding to get active by running for office, making an alternative company to companies you don't like, fighting for free and fair press, or exposing the hypocrisy of a democratic socialist. Everyone has a role to fight this. And if you don't, who will? Edmund Burke once said, the only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing. So don't be the good men who did nothing. Get active. We will take back our country together. Subscribe to our channel. Turn on notifications. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram so you don't miss an episode of our show that fights to expose Marxism and return to the Constitution. In liberty, have an awesome day.